We all have a different abstract image of the economy. In this sense, the economy means something different to everyone. It always been many individualistic images that we compare in conversations and use to drive logical course of action. Because if my abstract image of the economy is fitted in yours, I win the competition. That is the individualistic psychology part of economics. It is commonly said that 50% of the economy is psychological. However, there is also the collectivistic communication aspect of the economy. Karl Marx assigned this part to the economy, which was actually classified as sociology in the humanities, to mathematic topology. So this collectivistic communication part of the economy, which contrasts with the individualistic psychology part, has been interpreted as mathematics since Marx. The abstract labor is now the add something meaningful to the system from the individualistic psychology side, which is then processed by the collectivist mathematical side to create value. So if you want to model the economy mathematically, the visualization looks like this graph here. Each enterprise is a point, node, and the links, edges, are in a sense the stakeholders. In other words, everyone with whom the enterprise has business connections with. So customers, suppliers, employees, owners, and so on. They then send money back and forth to each other all the time. The entrepreneur is now trying to add another point here, from little to no branching as the current state to heavily branched as the target state. That is actually what is meant by profit. So profit is the Latin word pro, for, and fit, matching. So for matching, or survival of the fittest in a word. It's a position. Moving into this position is called the value proposition. So I move through the network from deal to deal. That way my profitable position is increasing weight or value, so to speak. The first graph theory image develops further into this one. The graphs, so to speak, the market players, each have an effective principle as individuals with which they earn money. But they stand, visually speaking, on a collective foundation from which it originates. That is the elusive origin of their value proposition. So where does this profitable, effective principle come from? Symbolized in this image as the purple ball in the center. The effective principle, also known as the context hypothesis, that they explored. It is the fund of their founding. The fund is an abstract space created by abstract labor. This is also figuratively Coleman's bathtub from sociology. An undefinable bottom and an empirical top. If you like, the purple ball is also symbolically the metaspace. This value proposition is not a connected space. Socialists assume that all market participants can be shaped from above. So I have 1,000 people and I turn 200 of them into nurses and 50 into doctors, and so on. And with this top-down view that everyone would be homomorphic, they would also drive economic growth and say, we need more chip industry, so let's set up an etat budget for it, and then the chip industry will grow in the country. But it is proven that this value proposition must appear from a disjoint set, topologically. So how else can this profitable position in the market be achieved? Through abstract labor. What you see here is Marx's perspective. There's labor and there's capital. And the rich capitalists also do a little something to maintain their wealth. And that is called abstract labor. But that's wrong. It is not a materialistic image in which all the parts are already there, as we see it. This small part of abstract labor, the yellow circle, which is on the side of capital, This abstract labor has the task of fully incorporating complexity into a new product. This is actually the meaning of the word corporation. To incorporate, like webbing in the abstract inner value. This is essentially, by nature, a different task from that of concrete labor. And for this abstract work, the entrepreneur is only rewarded retrospectively, if it works out. That's why the image on the right is more accurate. It's a process, not static and materialistic, but agile and ongoing. It is no coincidence that concrete labor is represented here as a rectangle and abstract labor as a circle. I want to use this to illustrate the fundamental difference, dichotomy, in the technical process. The difference is like the difference between arithmetic and geometry in mathematics. Arithmetic is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, while geometry is something completely different. It's about P and phi and so on. Concrete labor is like arithmetic. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Go there and do that. Done. That's why we imagine it as a rectangle. Straight lines with clear corners and lengths. For the entrepreneur, who is essentially a different kind of social partner, work is something completely different. He must design a money-making machine through abstract work. In other words, he must develop an effective principle that others can turn with their concrete labor, and it generates profits for all. He has to come up with a circle, so to speak. His work, the abstract labor, consists of geometry. He must think outside the box, and the concept have to be round, like a circle. In fact, value creation is both a circle and a triangle at the same time. And understanding this is what is meant by not a connected space. So socialism doesn't work because value creation is not simply connected. This is well known, and everyone wonders what not simply connected means. Exactly that. Value creation is both a triangle and a circle at the same time. Arithmetic and geometry. Square the circle. An effective principle in the economic complex. This effective principle, so this context hypothesis within a company, is called intrinsic value. There are two methods to appraisal the value of a company in total: the net value valuation and the capitalized earnings valuation. This is actually the paradox of value, or also publicly known as the diamond water paradox. Either I calculate from the one side, so what is there, or from the other side, how high are the earnings that were generated. The DCF, discounted cash flow valuation, by the way, is just the capitalized earnings valuation projected in the future. Karl Marx and Keynesianism economics say that something is worth as much as the number of hours of labor went into it, which is called labor theory of value. This can be classified as net asset valuation on the left. And the other side, the Austrian School, says that something is worth as much as someone is willing to pay for it. So a glass of water in the desert is worth more than in a city, because otherwise the customer would die of thirst, and therefore he pays a very high price. This marginalism can be classified on the right under capitalized earnings valuation. These are the actual theories taught at universities today. Keynesian economics, the left side with Karl Marx, is based on a static deterministic system. The right side, the Austrian School of Economics, is based on a dynamic complex system. In the Austrian School, an enterprise is the concept of an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur creates on a very personal level the concept, with the motive, the purpose, to win the prize. That is the meaning of the word enterprise, to enter the game to win the prize. That is why the enterprise comes first, as shown in the graph below. The Austrian School of Economics comes from the bottom up. Socialists, and thus Keynesian economics, are part of the statism doctrine. So for them, it's all about état, budget. They say that first there is the capital, with which a company is founded. The capital is used for the common good, and thus the concept is already known. The company does a business, and it's a firm, and it's enterprise. So they build it from top down, and the legal public terminology would be enough to describe it. I would now like to show you why this difference changes everything. To do this, I have created a specific research examination setup. I have discovered a new effective principle at the concept level. In specific, I have reinvented the paper coffee filter. With my aroma filters, the coffee tastes like vanilla, caramel, chocolate, or any other flavor. I have patented this, and this patent is my effective principle, my new context hypothesis. Because I say that people are willing to pay more for an aroma filter than it costs to produce them. A patent is an IP, intellectual property, as you can see on the upper graphic under intangible assets. In fact, it is a very picturesque invention because it draws a parallel with Melita Benz. She invented the coffee filter on the exact day 111 years earlier than me and built $1 billion company out of it. So Melita Benz created individualistically the concept of using paper to brew coffee. And I created individualistically the concept of impregnating paper coffee filters with aroma and then make the brewed coffee taste like a specific flavor. So that's the concept level. Melita and I both created self-similar enterprises. Because the coffee filter was new, she also created a new firm that way. Since there had never been a coffee filter company before, it is a new form in the economic entities. The word firm comes from the Latin word form. Firms are forms, and she added a new form to the economic complex. These forms turn over abstractly, and that is how revenue is created. The factory where the coffee filters are produced is the business. So if Melita has a business running in Germany for the German market and one in the USA for the American market, then the German business adds value in Germany and the one in America adds value in the USA. This is the view at the value-added level perspective. And at a public level, this union of the two different social partners, this antagonistic cooperation that forms a community, is then referred as a company. And this title refers to those who own the enterprise. It has not yet been possible to prove whether the Austrian School or socialism is right or wrong. This is because the Austrian School is a so-called a priori science, and Keynesian economics is an empirical science. This conflict is known as the method dispute and runs through all sciences. And now I will show you a method that makes the unmeasurable measurable. So similar to Melita Benz, I have also invented a coffee filter invention, aroma filter. Then I went around and talked to business people about whether they want to buy it. With this action, I have found a new enterprise and added a new firm to the economic complex. Aroma filters are a completely new product category. So they first had to be approved, and the Federal Office of Risk Assessment had to amend the regulation for hot filter papers, and so on. A new form in the economic complex because there was no aroma filter firm before existing. And this is now the unique experience setup with which I make a priori science measurable. I have no other valuable assets than the patent, so only IP has anything in it, and that is valued at US dollar 0.00. Everything else does not exist in my balance sheet. I am now applying an empirical research method for the intangible asset, IP. So I am testing the theoretical product aroma filters with the market based on demand. There are only a few small quantities of prototypes. I am testing them with retailers, investors, and customers to get their feedback. I have not yet crossed the Mises-Hayek border, so it is still just an enterprise and a firm, but not yet a business or a company. It would only be a business if there were busyness and aroma filters were manufactured in-house, because business is just the word busy, and so this is a unique experience setup. I am testing my a priori product entrepreneurship excrement aroma filter, which is self-similar to the coffee filter, because it is a logical advancement of the coffee filter, empirically with aggregated demand. So are there market players in the USA or in Japan or anywhere else who would trade this new asset? And surprise, the deduction shows that there is demand. At this moment, the entire project consists of abstract labor only. Now I can create the value added level as a business by surrendering prototypes. And if these prototypes are accepted by the public, then it is a company. The value added level is then the moment at which empirical measurements are possible. If capital now flows into the project, then tangible assets are added. So abstract labor and capital comes together, just as Karl Marx described the value formation. The intangible asset, the patent, is valued at US dollar 0.00 in fixed assets. Now empirical research is used through current assets, who gets added to measure the size of the fixed asset. Current assets are the equity of a third party. When someone places an order to me, I use it to measure my intangible asset. The prototypes that can then be produced are the measuring instrument for evaluating the new dimension in retail. In a way, it looks like this cone. So on the left is the Big Bang, and then a new dimension opens up in trade. The product category did not exist before, and then it enters trade and turns over. The new form, the new firm, turns over abstractly in the economic complex. It generates sales. The product rotates in the shelf for the first time. This is the meaning of the word turnover. It is a bit like Red Bull. Before Red Bull, there was no energy drink market in the USA or Europe. Then Dietrich Mateschitz came along and created this new dimension in Western commerce. We then measure the Cournot competition, Cournot point, maximum profit output and price point. How big is the aggregate demand? What factor do I have as a multiple? $1 million flowed in as capital, and the market creation has an annual turnover of $1 billion. But what is particularly important is the ratio for reverse polarity in the sense-making process of the market entities. So when exactly, at what revenue level or partnership, do market participants, the points in the graphs theory, change their minds and want to trade aroma filters? For example, a German company secures the license for Germany, and I approach companies in the US, Western Europe, or Japan with this information. Do they then also want a license? It's important to measure this ratio. 1/8 of the total market, 1/4 of the total market. I suspect that it will be in the scope of the Pareto principle, 80-20. Incidentally, I am still forced to value the IP, the intangible asset, the patent, with US dollar 0.00. I want, at this moment, point out to a scandal between the German and the US valuation and accounting standards. The US term fixed asset is not the same as the German title Anlagevermögen. The international regulations under the International Accounting Standards IAS 16 and IAS 38 point out to an individualistic person who owns the asset, while the German paragraph 5 ESTG law regulates that everything that creates value in the national account, so to say the macroeconomic model of Germany, must be appraised by the state government. The system points out to the socialistic collective, because the state is liable for every valuation that is allowed to circulate within its macroeconomic. How this legal regulation is essential for free economic competition in Germany, the EU, and how it differs in other countries around the world, I explain this in another video. You can find it in the caption. So far we have been talking about market entities that create a new asset. This new asset is now in the world and needs to be priced. Depending on the level, this abstract thing gets priced differently. What your asset gains is your income. It's your product. It's the Latin word pro, for, and duct, ductus. It's the very personal level, and you receive direct income as cash through your cashier, cash register. The asset that is created is actually a currency for the entrepreneur. So if you equate goods with money, according to Marx, commodity money, then that is not correct. Your asset is like your personal currency. It turns over in an infinite loop as long as it works in an economy. The system, the economic complex, shows you the value of your asset in the system's currency. So how much is your asset, your product, your currency in US dollars, an example. But you could also add your asset to another economic complex. Then another system would value your asset with the number in this system's currency, euros or pound, an example. Your created firm has a turnover with the system currency. The currency is that what is currently. Like there is a trader and he buys a container of coffee filters. He then transfers his cash, US dollars, into these goods. They are like a currency then, like the mentioned commodity money from Karl Marx. And this asset makes sense in the US economy or in Europe, etc. Because coffee filters are an effective principle here. In India, not. Because in India, nobody drinks filter coffee. Money, though, is the consequence of human action. So what results from concrete and abstract labor by humans is money. So when I was selling a container of aroma filters with an international wholesaler, I added value. Aroma filter selling became my business. My currency, aroma filter, turned into money. This is actually the Mises-Hayek border. It is the impulse, when the abstract work that was created at concept level and economic complex crosses the border to the value-added level, from bottom up. My business was busy and I created revenue with another market. Revenue is the real venue. So this means the location within the graph theory. This venue, the location, has received the money in return. Latin re means real or back. And this venue is the location in the graph, which I entered with the value proposition. So I desired income with cash. Therefore I have created an enterprise, which I won the prize. I turned it over with another currency because it was a new firm in the system. Just by methodological individualism, according to Schumpeter, I have done this following my guts only. By crossing the Mises-Hayek border, the international purchase of a wholesaler, I forced the financial economy value system to evaluate the event in the real economy price system reciprocally. At this moment, impulse, a business valuation is possible because now it is possible to measure the business success by empiric metrics, according to Friedrich August von Hayek. So these from bottom to top business valuations are always a capitalized earnings valuation. The stock valuation method is always a net asset valuation. Here the view is from top down. As the Keynesian economics says, there is a fund. This fund is owned by a company who has earnings. It is a public company, legal, totally regulated at this level, and the net asset are permanently priced at the stock exchange. When my aroma filters achieve this public level, it's called a IPO, initial public offering. In doing so, I have increased the money stocks qualitatively. This entire method of the Austrian School of Economics is the other side of the coin of the money supply. The currency area divides the money stock among all product groups. Now another divisor has been added. But because I'm in Germany, it is not legal for me to call a stock valuation under IFRS. US citizens could go public with their corporation immediately. This market access is blocked for German entrepreneurs. That's why there is no economic growth happening in Germany. Because every company is based on a contextual hypothesis, this position in the market can be described as a location in graph theory. Once such a contextual hypothesis or effective principle has accumulated, it could be represented like these spheres here. Those on the right show a tetrahedron. So the aroma filters are located here, and each sphere represents a neighboring industry or contextual hypothesis. So coffee, paper, aroma, sweeteners. In between is the place where the aroma filters centralize, the red ball in the middle. In my opinion, a useful measurement tool for evaluating a venture at such an early stage is to measure the stake of each of these related industries to the aggregated demand of the target market. So, what percentage of the paper market goes into filter coffee? What percentage of the coffee market goes into filter coffee? What percentage of the aroma market goes into filter coffee? And what percentage of the sweetener market goes into filter coffee? From this, we then can forecast a target size as a potential market. So this is an empirical method that could be used to price abstract work. And this method works reciprocally. So I could now take any four industries and test an invention in their tetrahedral gap for a common target market. The graphic on the left shows an economy. This is then effectively enlarged by adding a new industry. The invention, the intangible asset, disrupts the scalar product in the circular flow of income. And from a graph theory perspective, the inner product space, Hausdorff-Pre-Hilbert space, will show the newly created product category as a dimension. This is illustrated in the graph on the left. The sphere I created then inflates during the product life cycle. It accumulates capital, and this happens not only in the German economy, but in all markets where it is viable as a consumer product. In all habitable zones it can find. In other words, all markets where filter coffee is widespread. So the USA, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, and so on. The location is therefore not anchored locally in Germany or anything like that, but is decentralized in every economy that represents the target market. Until I revealed this information to you, your economic theory was incomplete, and it is precisely the job of abstract labor to clear this incompleteness. No matter which scientific discipline you follow, you will always find something undefinable. In an economic context, closing these edges, the balance of this gap, is also referred to as marginalism. The word margin means edge. And what marginalism means is measuring the edges between the assets of others. So this space is called the margin. And the spreadsheet is the calculation to measure the spread to the edges in all dimensions from your graph theoretical position out. This abstract work, performed by the entrepreneur, pays off retrospectively only. If the asset created is a success, this is then the creation contribution. A balance sheet is actually the balancing of that space measured by marginalism. Your asset is equal to the other assets. When your asset accumulated all possible capital globally, then we talk about equilibrium economics. A balanced state where opposing forces such as supply and demand are equal, leading to stable economic variables. This is what private equity does, trading with these assets. The balance that needs to be built here in scientific terms is that both Marx and Mises are right. In other words, Keynesian economics and the Austrian School of Economics are both right, but not at the same time. Time must be viewed dualistically here, according to Chronos and Kairos. So linear time is a Chronos, momentum or impulse is a Kairos. When starting a new enterprise, you need an impulse, so Kairos. That is why the Austrian School is correct in my time and explains the approach. In doing so, I have made a priori science empirically measurable. I have proven that purely through abstract work, the creation contribution is greater than the contribution margin, and that I have been there for legitimate owner of the profit. The content of this presentation, the terminology of the Austrian School of Economics, this must be understood as the counterpart to Karl Marx's theories. It's like that Marx was unable to explain this aspect of economics because he only considered one side of the equation. Or perhaps he was able to explain it, but these manuscripts have been lost. Maybe they just were never been published by Engels. The fact is that we can only have a complete picture of the economy if we follow both lines of pathway. Then the dualistic abstract picture of the economy is more accurate. One who is doing so can win the individualistic psychology competition then. The non-arithmetic renewable process advocated by the Austrian School can be empirically proven for the first time through my experimental setup. In my thesis of the socioeconomic fractal research, as well as the entrepreneurship action plan, I conclusively demonstrate the theorem, and this experiment proves it. By studying my theory, further products can be derived in tetrahedral gaps, making it repeatable for third parties. My theories are available at my website www.karsten-detzer.de. My name is Karsten Detzer. I'm an economic philosopher.